Cork Today on C103.
Ireland is facing a quiet crisis in childcare, and if the latest warnings are to be believed, a catastrophic collapse of a vital sector is literally just around the corner. The Department of Children's new regulatory framework mandates that all home-based childminders must register with TUSLA, and that must be done by September of next year. The state says that this is about child safety, professionalism and quality assurance. But the numbers tell a completely different story. Out of the estimated 13,000 childminders who are operating nationwide in this country, only a staggering 166 have actually registered to date. Industry advocates warn that thousands of childminders are simply planning to shut their doors rather than turn their family homes into heavily bureaucratic, small-scale institutions. At the same time, the government is pouring over €300 million into building new childcare infrastructure, critics say. Why is the state spending millions to create new spaces while implementing rules that destroys the flexible, trusted childcare that already exists? Joining me is Bernadette Orbinsky-Burke, who's Chief Executive of Childminding Ireland. And Bernadette, you're very welcome to the programme.
You've summarised it brilliantly there.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's really a genuine crisis.
Okay, let's start though with that figure of 13,000 estimated childminders nationwide, and that figure of 166 registered with TUSLA so far. Now, the government might argue, sure, it's early days and that they have until September of next year and people are just delaying the paperwork. You're calling it a strong indication of a failing system. Why is there such a stark disconnect?
Yeah, good question. I mean, just to say that we were updated last night that the figure of TUSLA registered childminders is now 175. Oh, tiny difference, but just to keep it right. It's a really, really difficult situation, and we know from talking to childminders that they're leaving in their droves. 13,000, we take that to be very underestimated in the number of childminders who are actually working in the country. And before the new regulations came out, you didn't have to register at all if you were minding less than 4 preschoolers. So there is no overall register where we can get the exact figure, but the department are working with a figure of 13,000. So I was just doing some maths there, and around 70 were already on the register before the new system came out. So that means 105 have joined in the 19 months. And if you take it that the pace continues as it is, it would take around 178 years to register the remaining childminders. I mean, it's, clearly there is something very badly wrong. And
I know we're reading heartbreaking accounts in many papers and seeing them online. I mean, there was one this week from Childminders. There was one this week, Leanne Gilmore, she's in West Dublin, absolutely adores her job. She's been doing it for 18 years. She's going to close up next month. She's taking up an office job because of these rules. When you read stories like that, are you hearing a lot of similar cases to that? People who love their job but just feel, this is not for me.
Well, I mean, yes, unfortunately, every day. And if I say to you about the conversion rates as well, in order to register, you have to do a pre-registration course. So around 700 childminders have done the pre-registration training. And they have, in the feedback they've given after their training, they thought the training was, very good. They had no problem with the way it was presented and the information given. However, only about 15% of them have then gone on to register. So they're not seeing themselves in that system. It doesn't speak to what they do. on a daily basis. They think the training itself is, very good if you want to go ahead on and register in this system, but it's not speaking to the reality of their lives. And I mean, if I bring it to Cork as well, and, with your population of 584,000 people, the largest county in Ireland, in the 2022 census, we know that there were 7,216 children in Cork being minded by a childminder.
Mm.
So what we know now, as at this today, there are just 16 TUSLA registered childminders across the entire county and city of Cork.
Wow.
So that means there would be one registered childminder for every 450 children that had a childminder in 2022.
Oh, that's not going to work. And to play devil's advocate, okay,
Yeah.
what is wrong with regulation? People want to know that their children are safe. Childminders are being asked to do, as you say, that pre-registration training, undergo an inspection and then be registered. Is that not standard safeguarding for anybody working with children, particularly vulnerable young children?
Yeah, well, to be absolutely clear, Childminding Ireland's always supported appropriate regulation. I mean, children's safety is non-negotiable. But we need the system to actually work, and right now it doesn't. And we're asking for a pause on the deadline so that a proper system review with independent oversight and real engagement with childminders can take place. I mean, there is a danger if things don't improve and the September 27 deadline arrives and very few childminders have registered, there's a danger that children might be less safe, because if people aren't reaching out for supports and guidance and all the good things that they can get from a supported system, we don't want that for children either.
Yeah, but you certainly don't want it to go underground. Is
Exactly.
there also, Bernadette, a concern that a childminder's private home address will be published on a public register? And if so, why is that necessary for regulation? And what are childminders saying about that?
Yeah, well, definitely that's one of the issues that a lot of childminders are raising with us, because they are on their own with the children during the day, and especially if they're in, a remote area or whatever, they feel that's a real safety risk. They could very much have their phone number or their email on a public register, or the town's land or the area rather than their specific address. And I believe it's with TDs as well, they're looking at that, if personal addresses should be made available. And again, you would think that was something that could be solvable. But everything seems very implacable, that you get into these conversations. And the emergency person, they have a backup person, so that if there's a crisis, if one of the children become unwell and the childminder would have to go to hospital with the child, there's somebody who the children know who can come in, who's Garda vetted, who can wait for the children until the parents arrive. So that's all well and good and sounds very sensible and whatever. However, the new regulations require that emergency person to be available at all times. And this is a voluntary role. And they won't allow the emergency person to stand in for the childminder as a backup person if the childminder has an appointment, even a medical appointment for her or one of her family members during the week. I mean, most health issues are treated during the week.
9 to 5, Monday to Friday, for sure.
Things that, it's just very frustrating trying to get any bend at any level.
And I mentioned in the introduction that the government has announced this over €320 million in state-led capital and infrastructure. This is to increase childcare capacity. But it kind of struck me, is the state effectively spending millions of taxpayers' money to fix a shortage that their own regulations are going to create?
That's the absolute policy contradiction that, again, we have raised. And I mean, there is no capital cost to the state of a childminder's service because they're doing it in their own homes. It's absolutely ludicrously stupid. I mean, if they could encourage more people to join and people to stay in childminding, I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful career. I mean, people have been doing it for decades and have so many children still coming back to visit them and extended family. I mean, it's a really positive, wonderful occupation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they could just
and
not
you know,
mess it up.
yeah, and my fear is if we have this thousands of like quiet closures, which is what realistically there's going to be, you have to ask the question, who's going to get hurt the most? I mean, we know that creches are already facing massive waiting lists. There's waiting lists to get on a waiting list in a lot of our creches, especially for the baby rooms and for the toddlers. I mean, what happens to shift workers? What happens to rural families, parents of infants, if all of these childminders vanish?
Well, you know, just if we talk about rural Cork, you know, for many families, childminding is the childcare of their choice. Small numbers and siblings being minded together, that suits many families. But if you look in some of the areas such as West Cork, North Cork and the Sheep's Head, a childminder is often the only childcare option with any reasonable distance. So centre-based care can't fit that hole. So if a childminder loses their childminder, they either have to find alternative childcare, which in these sort of areas is going to be extremely difficult, or one parent has to leave the workforce. It's that stark. That's what's at risk. I mean, it's not an abstract statistic. It's childcare infrastructure that holds communities together in rural Ireland. I mean, it's...
And let's call a spade. It'll often be the woman will be the one that will have to give up the job. Okay, just very finally, you've launched a campaign asking both parents and childminders to speak up and to contact their local TDs. We have until September of next year, but that's fast approaching that mandatory deadline.
Absolutely.
What exactly do you want politicians to change when a childminder or a worried parent calls them?
Well, what we want is a genuine system-wide review so that we know exactly where the issues are and will help us find solutions to them. We want independent oversight of that review so that it will have credibility. And we need real childminder input so that... you know, it has to appeal to the childminders, and you're only going to get that information from childminders. And then we're calling for a pause on the September 27 mandatory deadline so that the review can do its work, and if there are any recommendations, there's time to implement them. So that's really what we're asking for. 4 simple asks that shouldn't be undoable. This is solvable.
Okay, listen, Bernadette Urbinski-Burke, Chief Executive Childminding Ireland, pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for that and thanks for joining us.
And Patricia, before you go, could I just thank you? You've followed this issue all the time, right from the very beginning, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. That's kind of you to say that. Thank you, Bernadette. Good morning.